In a colder world, something heavy moved beneath the mist. This was the pampathere, a colossal armored survivor built to endure the crushing harshness of the open plains. It looked like a living tank, built for survival, a colossal fortress of bone and dense skin, navigating the mist in a harsh world where only the most heavily armored could endure. But behind the armor, it was not a monster, just another survivor, a creature with cautious eyes constantly scanning the horizon, fighting just to see another day. It walked slowly, but nothing about it was weak. Every heavy step it took across the vast, empty grassland was a testament to endurance, carrying a weight few other animals could manage. Its body carried protection shaped over millions of years. As the pale sunlight hit its thick shell, it illuminated an evolutionary marvel. Interlocking plates designed to keep the deadliest predators at bay. Because even the strongest could be hunted. In a landscape where food was scarce, an armored giant was a walking fortress, yet it was constantly watched by shadows lurking just beyond the mist. Survival here was never easy. Every breath drawn in the freezing air required massive energy, a constant struggle just to maintain the heavy body that kept it alive. This was Pampatherium, an armored giant of the Ice Age, a biological fortress built over millions of years to withstand the brutal forces of a prehistoric world. It looked unstoppable, but it was not. While its armor could withstand the teeth and claws of predators, it was heavy, slow, and entirely bound to the fragile balance of its environment. Because this story does not end in survival, it is the story of an armored titan that outlived predators, only to face a changing world it could no longer walk away from. It ends in silence, the quiet disappearance of a biological fortress that slowly walked out of existence, leaving behind only the fading echoes of its heavy footsteps. To understand why this unstoppable giant eventually fell, we must return to its world and witness the brutal prehistoric forces that originally shaped its armor. This was a colder world, a landscape shaped entirely by grinding ice, howling winds, and an unforgiving demand for survival where only the toughest endured. These endless plains gave vast space for life to spread out, but they offered little comfort and absolutely no place to hide from the elements or predators. In the distance, towering mountains of ice dominated the land, a constant physical reminder that this era was dictated by the crushing, freezing grip of the glaciers. This was a colder world, shaped by ice, wind, and survival. It was a time when the Earth was locked in a deep freeze, forging landscapes where only the most resilient creatures could endure. Endless plains gave space for life, but little comfort. Without trees to break the howling winds or offer a place to hide, every animal was exposed to the brutal elements and ever-watchful predators. In the distance, ice dominated the land. Massive glaciers carved their way through the mountains, serving as a freezing, impenetrable border that trapped life on the unforgiving tundra below. Life moved in groups, always searching for food. For many prehistoric herbivores, safety could only be found in numbers, constantly wandering the frozen plains to find whatever meager vegetation remained. The environment was harsh and constantly changing. Sudden, violent winds could sweep across the open terrain without warning, carrying blinding dust and bone-chilling cold that tested the limits of endurance. Here, the pampathere found his place. Amidst the sweeping winds and endless plains, this armored giant navigated the tall, dry grass, perfectly adapted to survive where others perished. Food existed, but never in abundance. The scattered vegetation offered just enough to sustain life, forcing massive herbivores into a relentless, unending search across the frozen earth. Low vegetation shaped the diet of many survivors. Roots, tough shrubs, and frozen grasses provided the essential fuel needed to keep their massive, demanding bodies moving against the cold. The pampathere was not alone in this world. It shared these vast plains with a diverse array of massive Ice Age herbivores, all locked in the same daily struggle for nourishment. Every herbivore lived under constant threat. While they focused on the frozen ground for sustenance, deadly predators watched from the margins, waiting for any sign of weakness or separation. Even while feeding, awareness never faded. It had to remain constantly alert, knowing that a single moment of distraction could invite a sudden, deadly strike from the shadows. Seasons could shift quickly, bringing new challenges. The pale sunlight could vanish in an instant, replaced by heavy, freezing gray clouds that commanded every creature to find shelter or endure the cold. Water was a center of life and danger. It drew thirsty herds from across the frozen plains, creating a tense gathering place where predators and prey were forced to share the same muddy banks. Even a simple act like drinking required caution. Lowering its heavy head to the water broke its line of sight, making it entirely reliant on its thick armor to protect its blind spots. There was little place to hide in such open land. With no dense forests or deep caves to retreat into, every creature on the plains had to face the brutal world head-on, completely exposed. Its color helped it disappear, even in the open. The earthy grays and browns of its heavy shell perfectly matched the dry grass, offering a vital layer of camouflage in a world without shelter. Balance existed here, but it was fragile. An intricate web of predators, prey, and giant herbivores shared these frozen plains, entirely dependent on the delicate rhythms of the Ice Age climate. For a time, this world held together, supporting giants like the pampathere. It was a harsh, unforgiving era, but one that provided exactly what this armored survivor needed to thrive, long before the ultimate collapse began. The pampathere was built for one purpose: protection. While other ancient mammals evolved for speed or stealth, this giant committed entirely to becoming an impenetrable, living fortress on the open plains. Its body was covered in heavy, bony plates. Stretching over its back and sides, this massive natural dome served as a permanent, heavy barrier against the deadly claws and fangs of Ice Age predators. These plates formed a shield strong enough to resist attack. Locked tightly together, the rectangular bone segments contained very little ornamentation, acting instead as a thick, unyielding wall of solid defense. Unlike a solid shell, its armor allowed limited movement. Specialized movable bands across its midsection meant the giant could navigate the uneven terrain and forage without being entirely immobilized by its own weight. Beneath the plates, dense skin added another layer of defense. Like a second suit of armor, this tough, leathery hide protected its more vulnerable areas, ensuring that a predator's strike would not easily find a weak point. Its legs were built to carry weight, not speed. Beneath the massive shell, thick, powerful muscles acted as living pillars, designed strictly to support the incredible burden of its own biological armor. It moved slowly, but with stability and control. It could not outrun predators, so instead it relied on an unhurried, relentless momentum that allowed it to traverse the harsh, uneven plains without ever faltering. Its claws helped it forage and navigate tough terrain. These spatulate tools were perfectly adapted to break through the frozen Pleistocene Earth, unearthing hidden roots and carving out paleoburrows for shelter. Its head was shaped for feeding close to the ground. Equipped with a long snout and unique grinding teeth, its heavy jaw was engineered to crush the tough, fibrous roots required to sustain its massive bulk. When threatened, it relied on armor instead of escape. Unable to run away, the giant would hunker down, planting itself into the earth and offering predators nothing but a solid, unyielding dome of bone. It was far larger than modern armadillos. Weighing over 400 pounds, this giant dwarfed its modern relatives, dominating the landscape as an imposing armored titan of the Ice Age. But size and armor came with a cost: reduced agility. The massive interlocking bony plates that kept it safe also locked it into a rigid, heavy frame, making swift movements physically impossible. It could not turn or react quickly in danger. If a predator approached from a blind spot, the heavy-set giant was forced to rely entirely on its unyielding shell rather than attempting a desperate escape. Its survival depended on being too difficult to attack. Predators knew that breaking through its thick, rectangular bone plates required far more energy and risk than the hunt was actually worth. It relied on awareness more than speed. With absolutely no ability to run away, its best defense was to spot danger early, hunkering down securely long before a predator could even think to strike. Its body demanded energy and constant feeding. Carrying over 400 pounds of solid bone and muscle required an endless search for sustenance just to keep the living fortress moving. It was a walking fortress in a dangerous world. For millions of years, this unyielding shell guaranteed its survival against the deadliest predators the Ice Age had to offer. But even the strongest armor has limits. While its plates could withstand the strike of an Ice Age predator, no amount of bone could protect it from a world that was about to change forever. As the light returned, the pampathere began another day of survival. Emerging from its cold resting spot, the giant prepared to face a familiar routine built entirely on endurance and the endless search for food. It traveled slowly, following familiar feeding paths. Moving across the sprawling open plains, it relied on an ingrained memory of the landscape, navigating steadily toward areas where tough vegetation still managed to grow. Food was found low to the ground, simple but essential. Its long snout expertly scanned the frozen earth, using sharp senses to detect the hardy roots and sparse shrubs that provided necessary energy. It fed constantly to support its heavy body. Because the vegetation of the Ice Age was so tough, the armored giant spent most of its waking hours continuously chewing and grinding fibers to maintain its strength. Most of its life was quiet, focused on endurance. Away from the immediate threat of predators, its daily existence was a slow, peaceful rhythm of survival, deeply connected to the harsh but sustaining prehistoric Earth. But even in calm moments, danger was never far. A sudden scent on the wind or a subtle rustle in the dry grass was enough to break its peaceful rhythm and put the giant on high alert. Other animals were always watching, waiting. In an ecosystem ruled by hunger, the armored giant shared its habitat with massive silent predators that constantly evaluated its defenses for any sign of weakness. It rarely rushed, conserving energy for survival. Every calorie extracted from the tough vegetation was precious, and moving its heavy bone-plated body meant it could not afford any unnecessary exertion. It could dig for roots, expanding its food options. When surface plants were sparse, its powerful spatulate claws easily broke through the frozen earth, unlocking vital nutrients hidden safely below the frost line. Water guided its daily movement across the land. The constant need to drink forced the giant to leave the safety of familiar grazing patches and embark on long, exposed journeys toward the muddy rivers of the Ice Age plains. Much of its life was spent in solitude, away from the brief, tense gatherings at the watering holes. The armored giant wandered the endless plains alone, relying entirely on its own endurance to survive. Rest was necessary to recover energy. Carrying over 400 pounds of solid bone and muscle was exhausting, forcing the heavy-set creature to seek the cool refuge of shadows when the day grew too warm. As the day changed, so did its movement. When the harsh heat of the afternoon finally broke, the cooling temperatures signaled the giant to rise once more and resume its endless, slow-paced march. It followed the rhythm of temperature and light. The cooler hours of dusk provided a brief window of comfort, allowing the pampathere to graze peacefully on tough shrubs without overheating beneath its heavy shell. Each day repeated the same pattern of survival: walking, feeding, resting, and watching, an ancient, unyielding loop that had kept this armored giant alive through millions of years of the Ice Age. But survival was not only about the present, it was about the next generation. For a species to endure the harsh Pleistocene, bringing new life into the frozen world was its most critical challenge. The young depended heavily on protection. Born with softer plates that had not yet hardened into solid bone, the calf had to stay tightly secured against its mother's impenetrable shell to survive. Learning came through following and staying close. The mother carefully guided her offspring across the safest paths, teaching it how to navigate the difficult terrain and locate hidden nourishment. Even in a harsh world, life continued. These rare, quiet family moments among the golden grasses proved that despite the freezing winds and lurking threats, the armored giants were capable of thriving. But most of life returned to solitude. Once the young were fully armored and strong enough to survive on their own, the giants separated, returning to the lonely, enduring march that defined their existence. And while its life seemed stable, change was already coming. The ancient loop of eating, resting, and surviving had sustained the species for millennia, but the horizon was quietly shifting. The pampathere lived a slow and steady life, feeding, moving, and surviving across the open plains. It was a rhythm built on endurance, but one that depended on a world that would not remain the same. The future of the species depended on very few young. Unlike smaller mammals that could rapidly rebuild their populations, these massive, slow-growing giants produced few offspring at a time, making every single loss devastating. From birth, survival was uncertain. Before their rectangular, bony plates could harden into an impenetrable shell, the young were dangerously exposed to the freezing elements and the constant threat of starvation. Protection was constant, but never guaranteed. Even with a fiercely guarded mother nearby, a shifting climate and relentless predators meant that many calves never lived long enough to add their own weight to the species. Low population meant every life mattered. In an ecosystem so sprawling and unforgiving, the sight of a family group became increasingly rare, pushing the entire species closer to a dangerous, irreversible threshold. As numbers dropped, finding others became harder. The once sprawling population thinned into isolated wanderers, separated by massive empty distances that made it nearly impossible for the heavy-set giants to find mates and recover. Isolation reduced the chances of reproduction. Without the ability to easily find a mate across the increasingly harsh and sprawling terrain, many of these armored giants simply lived out their days entirely alone. Distance slowly broke the species apart. As the population thinned, the vast spaces of the Pleistocene plains became an insurmountable barrier, turning a once-connected ecosystem into a world of scattered survivors. Less food meant weaker adults and fewer successful births. The shifting climate reduced the hardy plants they relied upon, leaving the giants undernourished and lacking the immense energy required to sustain a pregnancy. The young needed time, something the species was losing. Driven by extreme hunger, the adults were forced to travel farther and faster, pushing the vulnerable calves to their physical limits before their armor could harden. Every danger threatened not just one life, but the next generation. When a mother fell to predators or starvation, her calf was left completely defenseless, effectively erasing 2 generations of the species in a single tragic moment. Losses were happening faster than recovery. As the harsh climate and relentless predators took their toll, the vast plains offered a silent testament to a population that could no longer replace its dead. Even survival did not guarantee continuation. A solitary giant might endure the freezing winds and find enough roots to live, but without a mate, its personal victory meant nothing for the future of its kind. The population was becoming too small to sustain itself. When the scattered groups fractured and numbers fell below a critical threshold, the intricate web of reproduction completely collapsed across the plains. The body could endure, but the species could not. Though its heavy frame and thick armor were perfectly designed to withstand physical attacks, they offered no protection against the slow, silent starvation of its entire lineage. Each new generation faced greater difficulty than the last. Born into a world with shrinking food sources and increasing isolation, the few remaining young carried a burden their ancestors had never known. When numbers fall too low, extinction accelerates. Without the ability to find mates across the sprawling, unforgiving Ice Age plains, the natural cycle of life simply stopped, sealing the fate of the remaining giants. The pampathere was not weak, but it could not recover. Its massive frame and impenetrable armor made it a master of physical survival. Yet all its strength was powerless to reverse a dying lineage. By now, the species stood at the edge of collapse. The pampathere did not disappear because it was weak, but because it could not recover. With too few young, growing isolation and constant pressure, each loss pushed the species closer to the edge. Then the world began to change. Faster than before, the deep cold that had sustained the Pleistocene for millions of years began to break, forcing the frost and snow to rapidly retreat across the plains. The Ice Age was ending, and the land was transforming. As massive glaciers melted, the once dry, hard-packed earth softened into wet, muddy ground that threatened to bog down anything built for stability. The open plains the pampathere depended on began to shrink. The hardy, low-lying roots were quickly being replaced by dense, unfamiliar vegetation, permanently altering the ecosystem that had sustained them for millennia. Its world was no longer stable. Built to walk steadily across solid, frozen dirt, its massive 400-pound body now struggled to navigate the shifting, uneven terrain of a rapidly warming continent. Food became less predictable, harder to find. The specialized jaw and grinding teeth that had perfectly processed tough Ice Age roots were suddenly mismatched with the sparse, patchy food sources of this new era. Survival now required more energy than before. The massive animal was forced into longer, exhausting marches across unfamiliar ground, just to find the basic calories necessary to sustain its heavy frame. But climate was not the only threat. As the glaciers retreated, they opened new pathways for a completely different kind of force. One the armored giant had never encountered in its millions of years on Earth. A new predator had entered the ecosystem. Walking upright and armed with simple, deadly tools, these early human hunters brought a completely different kind of danger to the prehistoric plains. Unlike natural predators, this one did not give up easily. While Ice Age carnivores relied on ambush and brute force, these new arrivals hunted with patience, coordination, and relentless endurance. It could follow, plan, and return again. By intelligently reading the signs left in the mud and frost, this new predator turned the giant's slow, steady habits into a fatal vulnerability. The pampathere's size and slow movement made it vulnerable. Unable to run away, the exposed giant had nowhere to hide on the shrinking plains when the intelligent hunters finally closed in. Its armor could defend, but not forever. Against natural predators, its heavy bone plates were an impenetrable wall, but human hunters brought weapons and strategy designed to exploit the giant's few physical weaknesses. Hunting was not a single event. It was repeated pressure. As human populations expanded across the Americas, the heavy-set giants faced relentless, ongoing pursuit in every corner of their shrinking territory. With each loss, the population grew weaker. Because they reproduced so slowly, the continuous loss of adults to human hunters meant the species could no longer replace the numbers required to survive. Two forces were now working together: climate and human expansion. Starved by a melting, transforming ecosystem and relentlessly hunted by a new, intelligent predator, the giant's ancient defenses were finally failing. There was no safe direction left. Trapped between a rapidly shrinking habitat that could no longer feed it and a highly intelligent predator that never stopped hunting, the giant had nowhere to run. What had once been survivable was becoming impossible. The impenetrable armor that had successfully guarded its lineage for millions of years was suddenly useless against the combined forces of starvation and relentless human expansion. The point of no return was approaching. As the Ice Age ended, the pampathere faced a world that was rapidly changing. But the greatest threat came from humans. Hunting, combined with environmental shifts, created pressure the species could not escape. By now, the pampathere was no longer common. It was disappearing. The vast plains that had once echoed with the heavy footsteps of these armored giants now stretched out in an eerie, unbroken silence. The land remained, but the life within it was fading. The ancient freezing winds continued to blow across the shifting earth, sweeping over an ecosystem that was rapidly emptying of its greatest survivors. The survivors moved alone, separated from one another. Carrying the heavy burden of a dying lineage, these isolated individuals wandered the vast, unforgiving terrain with absolutely no hope of ever finding a mate. Distance made recovery almost impossible. What few giants remained were scattered across thousands of miles of altered landscape, effectively erasing any chance for the severely fractured population to rebuild. Even survival could not guarantee a future. A lone giant might successfully endure the harsh elements and find enough roots to keep breathing, But without others to share the plains, it was merely waiting for the end. Each passing step left fewer traces behind. The deep marks of its heavy claws, once a constant defining feature of the prehistoric plains, were slowly being washed away by the rains of a warming earth. The population continued to fall, quietly and steadily. Without the sudden violence of a single catastrophic event, the armored giants simply faded from the valleys and ridges they had occupied for millions of years. The changing world offered less support with every season. The thick, tough roots that its specialized bilobate teeth were perfectly designed to process had been replaced by sparse, unfamiliar vegetation that offered almost no energy. The land that once sustained them could no longer do so. As the deep cold of the Pleistocene retreated, the dry, open grasslands were swallowed by dense brush and flooded earth, completely erasing the only home the armored giants knew. The pressure did not stop. Even as the climate stripped away their food and flooded their habitats, the continued arrival of highly intelligent human hunters meant there was absolutely no safe sanctuary left to retreat to. Each remaining individual carried the weight of the species. As their numbers plummeted, the few lone wanderers that survived the day were left to face the approaching darkness entirely on their own. Groups broke apart until almost none remained. The changing, barren landscape could no longer support even small families, forcing the last few connections to sever in a desperate search for food. Strength was no longer enough. The heavy armor and powerful limbs that had protected it from Ice Age predators were completely useless against the slow, silent exhaustion of a collapsing world. The pampathere was nearly gone. The vast plains that had once thrived with their slow, rhythmic grazing were now overwhelmingly empty, signaling the final stages of their extinction. The last generation lived in a world already lost, stranded in an unfamiliar, transforming landscape. These final survivors walk the earth as ghosts, enduring the last days of an era that had already passed them by. The species had reached its final stage. After surviving for millions of years, the last of these armored giants stood alone beneath a darkening sky, representing the quiet, tragic end of an ancient lineage. One by one, the survivors disappeared, not in a single sudden catastrophe, but through a slow, quiet surrender to a changing world that could no longer sustain their heavy bodies and specialized needs. Then, none were left. The massive 400-pound grazers that once shaped the earth with their spatulate claws were completely gone from the plains, leaving behind an overwhelming emptiness. The extinction was complete. A complex web of life and behavior that had endured the harsh freezing winds of the Pleistocene was quietly erased from the Americas, never to return. The land continued, unchanged. The freezing winds swept across the muddy earth and new vegetation, entirely indifferent to the absence of the armored giants that had once called it home. But something was missing forever. The heavy footsteps that had once vibrated through the freezing earth were permanently stilled, leaving a profound and irreversible void in the ancient ecosystem. A species that once survived for ages was gone. Millions of years of evolutionary endurance, perfectly adapted to a brutal ice age, had been quietly extinguished in the blink of an eye. No sound, no movement, no return. The massive herds that had shaped the soil with their heavy bodies had vanished into the pages of deep time, leaving the land unnervingly still. Only silence remained. The deep, heavy dens they had once carved into the earth slowly collapsed and filled with rain, erasing the final echoes of their presence from the world. The pampathere had disappeared from life itself. What was once a living, breathing fortress of bone and muscle had been completely and mercilessly erased from the face of the earth. The story ended without witness. There was no grand finale, no final battle to mark their passing, just the quiet surrender of a lineage that had finally run out of time. And the world moved on. Seasons continued to shift, new vegetation took root, and rivers continued to flow, entirely unbothered by the massive giants that had been left behind in the Pleistocene. Leaving nothing behind but absence, where the heavy armored pampathere once carved its path across the earth, there was now only a vast, empty plain, swallowed by the silence of deep time. After extinction, the land remained, but something powerful was gone. The heavy armored giants that once dominated these open plains had faded completely into the quiet depths of deep time. The world continued, but it was no longer the same. The delicate balance of the Pleistocene was broken, leaving a quieter, entirely transformed world in its wake. What remains today are fragments of a life once real. Buried beneath the shifting mud and retreating frost, the bones of these magnificent survivors waited silently in the dark. Armor that once protected, now turned to stone. The thick, interlocking, bony plates that shielded them from Ice Age predators have become their lasting signature within the earth. Through fossils, we begin to understand what was lost. By carefully unearthing their massive 400-pound frames and unique bilobate teeth, we can finally piece together the incredible story of a vanished giant. From living giant to memory, the massive 400-pound grazer that once shaped the Ice Age plains has been permanently transformed into the silent stones we study today. The pampathere became more than an animal. It became a lesson. Its beautifully preserved armor, crafted by millions of years of evolution, now serves as a quiet reminder of how fragile life truly is. Its absence changed the balance of its environment. Without the heavy spatulate claws of the giant armadillos to turn the earth and manage the vegetation, the plains were forced to find a new equilibrium. A species shaped by millions of years, gone in a short time. All the incredible biological defenses that allowed it to survive the brutal Pleistocene were dismantled in the blink of an evolutionary eye. Its tracks disappeared, but its story remains. Though the heavy footsteps of the pampathere have faded from the earth, the incredible legacy of its survival will never be forgotten. In memory, it still walks the plains. Though its physical form is gone, the profound impact of these armored giants is forever woven into the deep history of the continent. Extinction does not erase the past. It changes the future. The permanent absence of the pampathere serves as a stark reminder of how deeply connected and fragile every ecosystem truly is. The pampathere is gone, but its silence still speaks. Its story remains in the fossils and the lessons we learn, standing as a quiet warning we must not ignore.